Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay. It looks like we are having some IT issues at the ILO, and also some of us needed to update our software. So thank you very much to all those of you who could join us. We are at a moment where the ILO, including colleagues in the research departments, and of course, Lab Admin OSH colleagues are busy proposing a new and more ambitious strategy on OSH, following the adoption of OSH as a fifth fundamental right and principle at work at the last session of the ILC. The last strategy was adopted in 2004. And I'm really happy to see some colleagues from Lab Admin OSH department, even though the director, Joachim, couldn't join us this morning, as we are also having the governing body this very week. As the strategic work of the ILO is starting, we thought it would be the right time to take a step back and get some fresh ideas and hear more about the holistic conditions to make working conditions safe and respectful of health. This is why we have invited Professor Loic Lerouge to be with us today. Professor Lerouge is a research director at CNRS in France, and he has also been involved in policy making many occurrences both at the national and international levels. Professor, it's a great pleasure to have you with us at our seminar. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm very pleased and honored to join you for this discussion today, for this seminar. This is an important moment for me because I have had various collaborations with the ILO for a long time now, and most recently through the International Research and Comparative Studies on Occupational Health, the CIECST. So the aim of this presentation on occupational health today, meaning ethics and fundamental rights, through the vision of a researcher in law, because I'm a researcher in law, is to open a dialogue with other disciplines and to open a global discussion on deep perspective. Sorry, I have now to upload my slides. So I share my screen. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So to begin this presentation, I will speak about 25 minutes around this topic. In order to underline it, I would like to say that health and work on health too are a system and constitute a system. And today, we talk about work, we talk about health, and when we talk about health, we can also talk about work. However, this system is part of a much wider environment, which is societal, economic, social, climatic, related to health hazards, migratory and humanitarian, or even geopolitical and conflictual. And this environment is complex. It is also in crisis. But it should be better understood in order to equally better take into account what is encompasses such as occupational health and work. The challenge is also to take into account all the factors that impact on health at work and how it impacts on the other components of the environment in which it is embedded. A better understanding of this environment also means giving it meaning, which is being lost in the crisis we are currently experiencing. From this conception of occupational health comes a holistic approach which takes into account all the parameters underlying the system related to health and work. On the multidisciplinary approach, of occupational health, or even an interdisciplinary approach, as well as the development of policies to keep workers at work and to adapt work to individuals are key to occupational health policies and thus to developing a context for sustainable work and respect for fundamental rights. A holistic approach to occupational health is therefore necessary in view of the evolution of work. And in this context, what is the role of the law, of the legal standards? Is it a lever for restoring meaning to the work? And what about ethics? Looking at the legal resolution of societal problems, it can also be through politics, economics, etc. The relationship between law and action, like behavior or conduct, is of interest. The legal standards prescribe and indeed influence social behavior by ordering what should be done, but at the same time, this distances them from reality. Dialogue with other disciplines is therefore essential here while returning to fundamental rights. And international labor legal standards help to give meaning to work on occupational health. The human right to health is a rich, coherent, and a vector of social justice. It is on the basis of international legal standards that meaning can be found. The ILO legal standards have an important role to play here. So one example is obviously the Declaration of Philadelphia concerning the aims and objectives of the International Labour Organization. And it's very important, I think, to remind that the Declaration proclaims the solemn obligation of the ILO to further among the nations of the world programs which will achieve adequate protection for the life and health of workers in all occupations. And the Declaration of Philadelphia has been annexed to the ILO Constitution, whose preamble recognizes the need to improve working conditions and to make work more human. And this is, of course, complemented by the recent amendment of the ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles on Rights at Work, which is an expression of the commitment of governments, employers, and workers' organizations to promote the fundamental human values that are vital to the economic and social life. And as you can see, here we speak about human values. So it's relating also to ethics. And all ILO members, even those who have not ratified the conventions in question, have an obligation by the very fact of their membership of the ILO to respect, promote, and realize in good faith and in accordance with the Constitution, the fundamental principle of providing a safe and healthy working environment for all workers. And this is a major step forward, which enshrine a fundamental legal standards like Convention 155 on occupational safety and health and Convention 187 on the promotional framework for occupational safety and health. And in this context, Convention 161 on occupational health services, on 190 on violence and harassment at work should also be cited as such essential conventions in order to support the fundamental right to ensure a safe and healthy working environment for all workers. And Convention 190 puts the emphasis on the link between workplace violence, bullying, and harassment and occupational health, and makes the link to psychosocial risks regarding the obligation of the employer to ensure health and safety. It is clear that we are dealing with a human being here who does not leave his or her spirit at the border of the workplace. Indeed, the whole person of the workers is involved in the work relationship, in its physical dimension, in its mental dimension, but also in its gender dimension. And similarly, it is important to take into account that the improvement of working conditions, which influences health at work, contributes to poverty reduction through economic growth and environmental protection. In this sense, decent work should be considered as a pillar of sustainable development. Poverty cannot be eliminated or reduced without work on healthy workers. And this approach is in line with the Brundtland Commission's definition of sustainable development, which aims at development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. The challenge is, in the words of Professor Alain Suppiot, to put back at the center of a shared political project to rebuild social relations based on a truly work regime. Now, at the European legal standards, more at a regional level, according to the 13th paragraph of the motivations of Directive 391/89 and the 4th paragraph of Directive 88/2003, the improvement of worker safety, hygiene, and health at work is an objective which should not be subordinated to purely economic consideration. And protecting health at work, and therefore work, because both are intricately linked, it's also about protecting everything we have. Work produces everything we have because it supports the education system, the health system, the social security system, and the economy. However, we are faced with dynamic and involving transformations and crises, which, while testing them, remind us more than ever of the importance of the principles embodied in the international and European Union labor standards in the field of occupational health and safety. These express the conditions of the necessary protection on a systemic thinking approach commensurate with the serious and complex problems of society. This framework should not only meet the expectations of the most advanced regions in this field, but should offer all states, taking into account their economic, social, and environmental situation, as well as their resources, the conditions for a continuous improvement of the protections granted. On working on the perception and representation of legal standards by labor and social economic actors is a crucial issue here. In other words, it's not a question of understanding occupational health and safety law as a burden, but rather of adopting an ethical approach and makes it possible to understand which occupational health is a vector of well-being and performance. This approach should favor collective prevention and not adopt individual prevention measures while questioning the responsibility of each individual within a work group. It is therefore necessary to involve all actors in a better understanding of how occupational health fits in. As Yogindra Saman, Chief Medical Officer of the Norwegian Labour Inspection Authority, rightly pointed out at the opening of the World Day for Safety and Health at Work on April the 28th, research is one of these actors, and the collective and social dialogue must be nourished by it in order to find solutions and innovate. And in order to reinforce this point of view and to enshrine the essential role of the social partner in occupational health, but also to make this topic a main subject of negotiation relating to working conditions, combining the fundamental right to a safe and healthy working environment for all workers and fundamental right to freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining could be a real gain. We are now two fundamental rights which are complemented. We can reflect here on how the legal standards relating to occupational health could integrate the current change. Their regulatory function governs the relationships and prerogatives of the actors in the world of work concerning the protection of their health. Thus, the overall objective is to contribute to the reconciliation of economy, well-being at work, and public and environment health. This process could allow the development of values and meaning that would activate the skills and capacities of each of the actors of the work environment through the prism of occupational health. In this way, this approach builds bridges between political and economic decisions on the one hand, and social and occupational health policies on the other hand. The construction of these bridges would favor the chances of an effective democracy in the workplace and the refocusing of the human being at work, the citizen at work, within economic life, and would no longer oppose health and performance. This approach does not focus on the formal implementation by companies of practices designed to respect the principle of sustainable development. Development has social, environmental, and economic. And this then emphasizes the possibility of providing a legal framework designed to encourage the development of a wide range of individual and collective skills, constituting a sort of social capital that is opposed to the dehumanized scientific approach of work as conceived by Taylor and Ford. But put another way, the ambition of this approach is to be able to promote healthy work environments that can foster a creative, dynamic, and socially responsible economy. This process includes a better education of future workers, a better initial education of future workers in occupational health, and will promote awareness of the ethical issues relating to the organization of work and their implementation. The challenge is also to mobilize an acceptance of long-term perspectives and not short-termism in an involvement of all stakeholders in the governance of organizations and an awareness of the physical, mental, and environmental occupational risks associated with work. The aim is to break down barriers and initiate exchanges between disciplines and jobs in order to achieve the most effective dialogue possible in the search for a workplace that is conducive to the well-being of the people in it while ensuring the productivity of the company. It is also about contributing to an approach on structure that clarifies and delimits the relationship between economics and occupational health. And legal standards have a leading role to play in defining rights and duties, but also in protecting people and organizing life in society, while expressing value and giving meaning. The aim is to approach occupational health issues from a new angle by dealing with issues related, for example, the place of legal standards in the discussion of economic development with regards to innovation and the protection of health at work. For example, again, relating to health, which is now understood in a global way. When work environment affects it, all areas of labor law are affected, as well as public health and environmental health. For example, again, relating to the evolution of work, the economic crisis, the new organizations of work, which put to the test the health of workers that occupational health law is supposed to protect. For example, again, relating to occupational health law, which is struggling to impose itself in the face of changes in organizations on work guided by economic logic. And finally, for example, relating to the challenge of reconstructing the economic discourse by making the actors aware that integrating healthy work is in everyone's interest, in the interest of everyone. And as a researcher in law, I believe that legal standards can help to bring about paradigm shifts to build links and greater fluidity between the macro level, the societal level, the meso level, a level that links the societal on the branches, on the micro level, in the companies and to influence the behavior, the cross-fertilizations on the involvement of the various stakeholders and actors. And legal standards have a role to play here in broadening the vision, the basis on the boundaries to bring health and productivity or performance closer together, to open up spaces for innovation, to achieve a new ethic of the organization of work by integrating workers' health in their design and implementation. And the aim is to provide leverage for integrating occupational health into the economic logic, but also to reconsider the statutes of the employer and their responsibility for health and working conditions in the light of changes in work that are modifying the subordinate relationship at work. And we are witnessing a wave of health risks that is in the translation of a bad work management, leading sometimes to a life of ill health in the context of globalization of the economy. And even in a dynamic and creative economy. For example, how can acceptable occupational health protection or moderate stress levels be maintained? On a vast existing literature on illness and psychosocial quality of jobs makes this challenge clear. The magnitude of the cost is enormous. This challenge becomes a major economic and social issue, even a humanitarian issue sometimes. It is a question of building the missing links through alternative solutions for a healthy economy and development of social capital, while aiming for a new understanding of innovation in work. However, it is necessary to include health and more broadly social and political issue by involving economic, labor, and health actors in a lifelong health perspective. The prism of health at work pushes to rehumanize work, to take into account in the organization of work both the human factor and technical and economic factor. And the focus will be on supporting decision-making in the face of concrete issues relating to decision-making processes, on the value and principle at stake on their relationship to each other with regard to the reference framework, which will be legal standards. However, legal standards, which are themselves part of a historical and social context, should not be considered as a closed system, as this will be isolated from its environment. Thus, the system evolves toward greater complexity by incorporating and simplifying its environment. And the spirit that accompanies the enactment of legal standards and the meaning of their application, of their implementation, are not hermetic to the juxtapositions of ethical value. For example, speaking of the human in the context of work is opposed to the commodification of the worker's person, which denies his or her humanity in the way work is managed, on how the work is managed. And the ethical approach will guide the application of legal standards relating to the employer's powers of management on health at work. Ethics in the workplace refers to the meaning of the decision taken, the values on the spirit associated to them. It justifies the action of the actors in the world of work at individual and collective levels, but also it refers to their responsibility. The aim is to help future labor actors to better understand the world of work in which they will involve. The law shows the way, the path to follow and set the limits while guaranteeing the freedom of each individual. Ethics makes it possible to reassess the legal standards of work and health at work and to better understand the rights and obligations arising from them. The challenge is also to respond to the search for adherence and social acceptance of occupational health and safety law. It's a very important point here. And another challenge is to think of the right to health as the same for everyone, whether at work or not. Questioning health at work Thus leads to questioning the recognition of a right to health specific or not to work. The principle is to change the representation of the approach to health at work. Similarly, the right to health is inalienable. It is linked to respect for dignity. And every worker has a right to benefit from the same protection regardless of his or her status or the size of the establishment in which he or she works. The aim is to create the conditions for a responsible commitment or human way of organizing work to respond to the principle of adapting work to people or to promote well-being at work. The perspective is also to support or not the implementation of occupational health policies linked to work organization in the medium or long term rather than thinking again in the short term. Developing training for managers in social dialogue, human relations, on the environment is necessary in order to better anticipate problems. On the search for tools or methods to be applied, on the search for rapid operationality are not ways of taking the time to reflect together, so as not to consider the economy, health, and organization as constraints on which we constantly come up against. And the French telecom case is an emblematic case on ruling in France about this question on regarding institutional workplace bullying and harassment, but we can speak about that during the discussion. So now in conclusion, because time in flying, legal standards are a mode of social regulation that can modify models or propose alternative solutions. Initial education on ethics are essential for economic logics that bring health and performance closer together and for promoting working conditions that allow space for innovation while guaranteeing organizations of work which respect health and work environment. Education on ethics are also essential in a world of work that is now profoundly challenging social, temporal, and relational boundaries. It is also about ensuring equal access to occupational health, and it's a very important point here. And in the sense of this objective, the holistic approach to occupational health calls for health literacy, which brings together the skills needed to find, understand, evaluate, and use health information in order to make decisions on stabilize or improve one's quality of life, in this case at work. Our legal standards are one of the levers to achieve a social economic paradigm shift. The aim is to adapt legal rules to the new forms of work organization by taking real account of human aspirations and avoiding the dehumanization of work. And my last sentence will be questioning the value we place in work, the meaning of work and the lifestyle we derive from, we come from. It becomes central to a decent and sustainable environment taking into account lifelong health. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Lerouge, for this inspiring presentation. I'm sure it got many of my colleagues reflect on what this means for the work of promoting occupational safety and health standards. So let me open the floor. I see there's already a request for your PowerPoint to be shared with the participants, if this is possible.
Sure. Yes, it's possible.
I would like to start to ask a question.
I can say something. It's not a question to myself. But,
well, I think it was a lot.
Okay.
There's also a question from Tamina, and let me read it to you. Tamina, Convention 190 is another example of legal standard that gives a special role to OSH mechanism to prevent and address violence at work. So this is the question of how OSH can be effectively used to address this phenomenon and how standards in violence and harassment can further shape further development of legal standards in the field of OSH.
Thank you very much for your question, Tamina. Yes, I spoke about Convention 190 in my presentation, but not too much. But I think that even if we recognize as fundamental Convention 155 on 187, it's also important to take into account the other conventions in the field of health and safety, particularly the 161 also about occupational health services, but also the 190, because I think it's a very important convention because it focuses on the physical, on mental effects of the workplace on the workers. And it makes a strong link between workplace bullying, workplace harassment, workplace violence, and health and safety law, health and safety legal standards, and the employer obligation to ensure health and safety. And I think it's a convention that allows us to go further in all the dimensions of health and safety at work with new how we say that, with new phenomena to take into account. Now it's a real progress related to the domestic violence issues, and also the gender-based violence and harassment. So I think health and safety at work is a whole. So even if we as recognized Convention 155 and 187 as fundamental, it's also important to think health and safety as a whole, and to think that this kind of conventions entered in the framework of Convention 155 and 187.
Thank you, Professor Lerouge. Other questions? Alessandro, I suppose colleagues can take the floor, right? We can also ask the question in writing.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to take the floor, just use the raise the hand function, and we can hand you the floor, and you can ask your question live, or just write it in the chat. Up to you.
One of the challenges is to see again the same situation as in the French company France Telecom. In order to remind what happened, it's I can't detail all the facts, but the head of this big French company wanted to restructure and to suppress many jobs in the company under a very short term. So they design an organization of work very, I can say that, very aggressive, very violent, because it has an effect on all the hierarchical levels of the company, and has stressed almost all the employees of the company. And the effects was, for instance, on the most serious effects was work-related suicide. So now we have to say economic logics does not have the advantage on health at work. And we have strong tools in order to prevent this case. And we have to remain again and again that there are fundamental rights at the international level, also at the regional level, like in the EU. And we don't have to forget we are all human, even if we are working or not.
I see we have a question from our colleague Franz.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Franz Ebert. I'm a researcher at the ALO's research department as well. From what I saw in your work, you deal partly with the multi-level dimensions of OSH governance, including the national, the international level, as well as also the regional or European level in this case. And I was curious to hear a bit more about how, in your view, the different dimensions of and the different levels of governance with regard to OSH can be harnessed or should be harnessed with a view to maximizing the effectiveness of OSH governance, perhaps also specifically in the European context and based on your research. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I think one of the challenges is, I don't know if it's a good word, but it's also the adherence and the acceptation of, I can say that, the existence of the fundamental rights. And also in order to be able to implement national or domestic law in this framework. And in the EU, the debate is now the following. Do we need to make a specific directive on psychosocial risks at work? Because, for instance, we have a framework European directive, the 391/89, so from June 1889, who was adopted under a very progressive presidents of the European Commission, the Delors Commission, and everything is written in this directive. And I invite you to read the directive. It's very interesting. And the directive says that all occupational the health at work has to be taken into account by the employer, to be protected by the employer in all aspects of the work. So we can say, yes, it's enough to include psychosocial risks in this directive. But in fact, now, maybe today in 2022, we have reached the limits of the capacity of implementation of this directive. So we have different reflections on how to deal with this case. First is to update the directive, but with a risk to, in fact, to reduce the rights from the directive. It's like to open, if I can say that, a Pandora box. The other approach is to say from the Commission, for instance, in the project of directive on telework, on platform workers, to say we are going to mention the terms of psychosocial risks. So it's enough. On the third approach, to say we need to adopt a specific directive on this on psychosocial risk at work in the framework of the framework directive. So what I would like to say here, sometimes maybe it's better to write in the text everything in order to say we know the rights, the duty, the the obligation, because it's written in the text, in the standard, in the legal standard, or not to say we are going to interpret the legal standard. For example, in France, but maybe in other countries, if we didn't include it, if we hadn't included in the labor code in 2002 the terms of physical and mental health in the labor code, in fact, in the practice of the labor law, even if when the employer have to protect the mental health at work, he have in practice of this right, he see only the physical. Most of the time, he see the physical aspect of health, because what we don't see doesn't exist, in fact. So we need to write in the legal standards exactly what we would like to do in order to say we are not in a context or in a position to ignore this new phenomenon. Is the reason why? It's one of the reasons the Convention 190 is so important also. I don't know if I really respond to your questions, but many things are coming in my mind. But for me, I think, yes, you're right. There is a question of applicability of implementation of the text, and we need to precise them according to the current evolution.
Thank you, Professor Lerouge. Actually, I also would like to ask a question. You said at the beginning of your presentation that an holistic approach to occupational safety and health has the potential to solve many crises, and you mentioned the environmental crisis, migration. Now, coming to the COVID crisis has shown the importance of health at work, but it has also shown that governments and sometimes enterprises could get really heavily involved in the life and the work life of citizens, of us all. So how do you see the impact of the COVID on the risk and opportunities of your framework? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Catherine. I think that the holistic approach don't want exactly to solve everything, but in order now to treat health and safety issue, we have to understand all the environment in which health at work is implemented. And here about the COVID, yes, that's right. What we have seen, it's a lot of directives from, if I can say that, the public health, which told us, to the workplace, to the companies, to what to do. But we have also to learn a lot about what health and safety standards can bring to public health. And what we can learn as a lessons from the COVID crisis, which first is that now occupational health and public health have strong relationships, and public health could have an impact on occupational health, and bad occupational health could have an impact on public health. So my position is the following: is now occupational health standards has also good practices, contains good practices, and can learn to public health and can contribute to the public health. And we have to find a sort of combination of the both are not a domination of one on the other one. I think it's very important here because occupational health has contributed a lot to prevent the COVID.
Thank you very much again. I would like to turn to my colleagues and ask them if there's any more questions. Because I have some more questions.
We have a question from an attendee in the audience. My name is Nafradi, if you would like to go ahead with your question.
No, please.
Yep. Thank you. I'm Balin Nafradi from the Loic Lerouge branch of ILO, and I have a question relating to ethics. In particularly, my question is that health issues are linked to sensitive personal data because they are like medical records and similar. And I guess it's even more sensitive when it's getting to like mental issues or social or psychosocial risk related events. So my question is that, in your view, is it important or necessary to include protection for this health-related personal data of workers into occupational safety and health standards? Or, as you mentioned, OSHA is not operating in a vacuum. There are other parts of the law which protects these issues. Is that sufficient, or it's better to have a specialized OSH and personal data related law? Thank you.
Yes, it's a question related to one of the previous questions. I think the response is both. That is to say, from my point of view, these sensitive persons are included in the general approach of I can say that the fundamental legal standard. But at the same time, we have to know and to understand better them and to provide an adapted legal framework in order to help them to get the same rights as the other ones and to get the same working conditions and the same rights in the workplace. I think we need also specific legal standards in order to combat, if I can say that, the implementation of the OSH law in practice. So in order to push the practice to take a better consideration of sensitive persons, we need also to mention, to write the things in the text.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there is no other questions, then I would like to ask another question.
There is a question from Simon Baumer.
Okay.
Yes. Hi. Good morning, Mr. Professor Lerouge. Thank you very much for this very interesting and inspiring presentation. I'm Simon Böhmer from the research department. And regarding the holistic approach, you mentioned that there is kind of a challenge to break down barriers and initiate exchanges between disciplines, and also that there is this challenge to mobilize all stakeholders to accept a rather more long-term perspective on occupational health. And at the same time, you also said that legal standards have a leading role to play in that. Do you have maybe, out of your experiences also with comparative analyses on this topic, any examples, any examples at national level for good legal standards, maybe also outside the EU?
The question is very broad, but what I can say now, in the French case, for instance, we adopt legal standards more and more rapidly, quickly. It is a big issue because even we have to take the time to design OSH policies, we have also to take time to adopt OSH law sometimes, because we need to check, for instance, if they are compatible with fundamental rights from international legal standard, from the European Union legal standard, or the case of France. And I think, as you said, we need to involve all the players, all the stakeholders in the process of the design of a new law, a new act on health at work. So it's this example is the contrary of an example of a country who takes time to adopt a law. If we see the example of Japan, for instance, they take a lot of time to adopt a law on power harassment. They have a lot of institutional debates, and they try to adapt their conception of power harassment. As you can see, it's not workplace bullying, workplace harassment. The term is very specific to Japan in order to get a legal framework on power harassment. But it takes time because also it was very tricky to find an agreement on this topic. Now we need time since 2019 to see what is the effect of these new standards on power harassment. Even if they keep time, they keep time also because there were a big debate around this phenomenon.
I see that we are reaching the end of our seminar. Before we close, Professor Lerouge, could you say something on occupational safety and health standards in agriculture, and what would be a good entry point for the ILO to promote such a difficult subject in the framework of the holistic approach?
Yes, you're right. And there is the Convention 184 on occupational health in the agriculture, that it's very important to promote it. It's one of the tools we have to promote and to base work. Now, because of geopolitical aspects, because of economic crisis, agriculture is in the center of many things. But at the same time, it's a sector very difficult because sometimes they are under the framework of a specific regime, and sometimes they are under a general regime for all the workers. But what we can see about this sector, it's put the emphasis on the invisible workers. And I think it's very important. The migrant workers, the workers who are not under an employment contract, and sometimes there is a sort of an accommodation of the workers in the agricultures, because we want some agriculture from this specific national country, not this country, etc. It's not a human treatment of the worker. So what I can say, we can through this sector, we can enlighten the invisible workers in the agriculture, but also in other sectors. And to highlight also the informal sector's issues and the workers from the informal sector. That is a big question at the international level too.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Lerouge, for this exciting presentation and also for the lively discussion. And I also would like to thank all of my colleagues who were able to join us today.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too.
Thank you. Have a great day.